There's a strange kind of silence that falls over a man when he finally understands women, not with bitterness, but with clarity. It's not the silence of defeat, it's the silence of someone who's seen the trick behind the curtain. You stop arguing, you stop explaining, you just see. And once you see, you can't unsee. That's what Machiavelli did to politics. He didn't invent deceit, he revealed it. He stripped power of its poetry. He showed that beneath every promise there's ambition, beneath every smile, calculation. And that's exactly what happens when a man begins to understand the female mind. She doesn't conquer you with force, she conquers you with need. She studies the language of your hunger, then speaks it fluently. She learns what makes you feel like a man and gives it to you just long enough to make you dependent. You call it connection. Machiavelli would call it leverage, because once someone knows what you crave, they don't need to control you directly. They can simply withhold. And that's the first principle of power. Whoever can walk away rules. You'll notice it in the smallest gestures. The way she pauses before replying to your message, not out of indifference but precision. The way her affection flickers just when you start to feel secure. You think it's emotional inconsistency. It's not. It's psychological tension designed to keep you guessing, craving, proving. Machiavelli would smile at that. He said a ruler must appear merciful, faithful, humane, but only appear. Because certainty makes people bold, doubt makes them loyal. Men are simple in their strategies. We fight, we chase, we conquer. Women manipulate outcomes without lifting a finger. They let your own ego do the work. They know a man's greatest weakness isn't lust, it's the desire to be understood. So she listens, she empathizes, she becomes the mirror you've always searched for. And when you finally see yourself in her eyes, you'll do anything not to lose that reflection. That's the moment you're conquered. Machiavelli would have warned you. He wrote that power doesn't always announce itself. It often hides behind virtue, behind softness, behind beauty. The greatest manipulators aren't the ones who lie. They're the ones who make their truth sound like your idea. A woman doesn't need to tell you what to do. She just needs to make you believe it was your choice all along. And that, to Machiavelli, would be the highest form of rule. You see, control today doesn't look like kings and queens. It looks like emotion. It looks like connection. It looks like love. But behind that illusion, the same principle lives. Whoever defines how you feel, defines what you'll do. And in that sense, the female mind remains the most elegant example of power Machiavelli never wrote about, but absolutely would have admired. He once wrote that a ruler must learn how not to be good, that virtue without strategy is suicide. That line has been twisted for centuries, but its meaning is painfully clear. The world rewards those who understand power, not those who pretend it doesn't exist. And if you look closely, you'll see that women learn that truth long before men ever did. They learn that purity, kindness, and softness were never ends in themselves. They were disguises, necessary masks in a world that gave them no throne but access to every mind that sat upon one. A woman's power is invisible until it isn't. She doesn't need to win arguments. She just needs you to feel misunderstood enough to chase her understanding. She doesn't need to demand loyalty. She just needs you to fear losing her approval. Machiavelli would have called it governing through affection. The modern man calls it love. It's the same mechanism dressed in perfume, and that's what makes it so dangerous. It feels holy while it's binding you. Most men can't handle this truth because it ruins the fantasy they've built around romance. They want to believe in innocence, in the idea that affection is pure, uncalculated, freely given. But Machiavelli would shake his head. He'd remind you that every exchange in life, whether in a palace or a bedroom, runs on negotiation. The moment you offer devotion, the other party starts deciding its price. A wise man knows this and still chooses to love, but he never forgets the cost of blindness. There's a reason Machiavelli said it's better to be feared than loved if you can't be both. Fear, to him, wasn't terror. It was respect, the recognition of consequence. Women understand this better than anyone. They don't seek to be loved without boundary. They seek to be valued through consequence. That's why they test. That's why they pull away when you give too easily. Not because they hate affection, but because instinctively they know unchecked devotion has no gravity. A man who can't say no is a man whose yes means nothing. So they provoke it. The conflict, the silence, the distance. They create the storm to see if you'll drown or swim, not out of cruelty, but out of design. Because somewhere in that test, they discover whether you are a man of substance or a man of sentiment. And that's the Machiavellian truth most men never grasp. Love, like power, respects boundaries more than feelings. When you start to see this, you stop taking things personally. Her moods, her shifts, her contradictions, they stop being mysteries and start looking like tactics of survival. You stop chasing reassurance and start reading patterns. You realize she's not emotional, she's strategic. Every tear, every silence, every act of indifference has meaning. She's not playing games. She's ensuring control in a world that takes it from her daily. And in that understanding, you finally grow up, because a man who can see through the performance without resenting the performer becomes ungovernable. He understands the theatre, but no longer needs to play the fool. Machiavelli would have called him the perfect prince, not the man who resists power, but the one who learns to dance with it without losing himself. Love is the most efficient prison ever built because it convinces you that you're free. You decorate your cell with memories, call the chains commitment, and tell yourself this is what devotion looks like. Machiavelli would laugh at that. He'd say, "You have confused surrender with virtue," because that's what most men do when they fall for a woman. They abandon strategy and call it honesty. They drop their guard in the name of love, believing transparency is the highest moral good. But to Machiavelli, transparency is vulnerability. And vulnerability, in the wrong hands, is a leash. A woman doesn't demand control, she inspires it. She turns your need for validation into obedience. She lets you talk about your ambitions, your dreams, your wounds. She studies them like a map. And then, when the moment comes, she knows exactly where to press to make you move. That's not manipulation, it's instinct. A kind of political genius disguised as intimacy. She doesn't tell you what to do, she makes you want to do it. That's what Machiavelli meant when he wrote that men are more easily moved by appearances than by realities, because the appearance of love is often more persuasive than truth itself. Most men think the fight for control happens in arguments. It doesn't. It happens in silence, when she withdraws affection and watches what you'll trade to get it back. That's where she learns the true measure of your strength. Machiavelli warned rulers never to depend on the loyalty of others, because loyalty given freely is always conditional. It lasts only until a better opportunity appears, and yet men build their entire emotional world on the illusion that love is eternal. That's the great blindness of the modern man. He still believes love is immune to strategy. He still believes emotion is sacred ground untouched by power. But in reality, love has always been the most political force in existence. Every glance, every confession, every promise of forever carries negotiation. Who gives more? Who risks more? Who can walk away first? That's not cynicism, it's structure. The architecture of every attachment, ancient or modern, runs on it. Machiavelli would tell you that power always disguises itself as virtue, because virtue makes power acceptable. Women, whether consciously or not, understood this. They learned to embody what men desired most: softness, loyalty, mystery, because those qualities disarm the very logic that protects a man from being conquered. When she makes you feel safe, you stop guarding yourself. When you stop guarding yourself, you become predictable. And predictability, to Machiavelli, is death. There's a reason he said a wise ruler should learn from the fox as well as the lion. The fox sees the trap. The lion breaks it. A woman, however, builds it, not to destroy you, but to understand you, to test whether your power is real or performed. She wants to know if your strength depends on her approval, because the moment it does, she owns you, not physically, but psychologically. And there's no army strong enough to free a man who's emotionally enslaved. But the few men who see this truth don't become bitter. They become balanced. They stop expecting love to be pure. They start respecting its complexity. They no longer seek women to complete them, but to reflect them. And that's when something remarkable happens. Women stop trying to control such men. Why? Because control only works on those who can be moved by it. Once a man no longer fears losing affection, he becomes ungovernable. Machiavelli would have admired that man, the one who could love deeply yet remain sovereign, the one who could desire without dependence, because that, in the end, is the highest form of power, not the ability to dominate, but the ability to remain free in the presence of what could enslave you. A man's real strength doesn't show in his words, it shows in what he can walk away from without flinching. Machiavelli understood that restraint is a weapon sharper than rage. He said that fortune, like a woman, yields to those who act with calculated boldness. And most men never learn what that means. They either submit completely or rebel blindly, but rarely master the middle ground, the calm dominance that neither chases nor resents. The kind of control that doesn't announce itself, but radiates from stillness. That's the posture of a man who has mastered his emotions, and that's the one thing a woman cannot manipulate. A woman will test that quiet power because instinct drives her to find its edges. She'll poke at your patience, your pride, your peace, not to destroy it, but to measure its depth. She needs to know whether your strength is real or reactive, because every woman, whether she admits it or not, feels safest with a man she cannot shake. It's not cruelty that draws her to that steadiness, it's biology. Emotional chaos seeks stability, like gravity seeks mass. And Machiavelli would say, that's the law of all politics. Unstable forces orbit whatever refuses to move. But men today have forgotten this. They mistake empathy for submission, love for permission, and boundaries for cruelty. They think being a good man means being endlessly available. Yet Machiavelli would warn them, availability is weakness. He'd say, never let yourself be too accessible, for familiarity breeds contempt. The same rule that protects rulers protects the heart. When you make yourself too easy to reach, you make yourself too easy to replace. Women don't respect what they can predict. They respect what they can't fully possess. That's why indifference is such a powerful force, not emotional coldness, but inner calm, the kind that doesn't react to provocation. It's not about playing games. It's about showing that your mood, your focus, your purpose are not up for negotiation. Machiavelli would call that political mastery. In modern language, it's masculine composure. The man who cannot be provoked is the man who sets the terms. The moment you stop fighting to be understood, you start being respected. Every gesture of self-restraint communicates dominance. When you choose silence over defense, she feels your power more than she hears it. When you let her storm pass without trying to control it, you become the mountain she orbits around. It's not manipulation, it's sovereignty. Machiavelli would say you've learned to rule without ruling, to influence without demand. You've become the kind of man who can't be emotionally drafted into someone else's chaos. And that's the secret every powerful man eventually learns. Women don't truly want to control men. They want to feel that their emotions can't. They want to push and see that you remain unshaken. They want to see that your loyalty comes from choice, not dependence. Machiavelli's brilliance wasn't that he taught cruelty, it's that he exposed the futility of innocence in a world built on power. The same truth applies to love. Purity without power gets devoured. But when a man unites both, heart and discipline, compassion and command, he becomes something rare. A man who can love freely because he no longer fears losing. You begin to see that emotion itself is neutral. It only becomes dangerous when it's ungoverned. Machiavelli never condemned feeling, he condemned naivety. He knew that rulers fall not because they feel too much, but because they let feeling dictate judgment. And so it is with men in love. The tragedy isn't that they care, it's that they care without discipline. A man's downfall rarely begins with betrayal. It begins with his inability to recognize when his compassion has become compliance. He gives endlessly, thinking generosity will buy peace. But in the politics of affection, excessive giving signals desperation. Machiavelli wrote that men sooner forget the death of their father than the loss of their inheritance. What he meant wasn't greed, it was value. People by nature protect what feels scarce. Offer too much and you teach others that your energy is cheap. Withhold too much and you teach them to fear you. Wisdom lives in the tension between both, where love is real but never reckless. A woman's instincts sharpen around that tension. She feels drawn to the man whose warmth is chosen, not automatic, to the one who could walk away but doesn't. It's the same paradox that makes power magnetic. Restraint creates mystery, and mystery creates respect. When Machiavelli advised princes to appear merciful, faithful, humane, and upright, he didn't mean to fake these traits. He meant to master their timing. The same rule governs attraction. Give kindness freely, but never predictably. Love deeply, but never completely at the expense of your center. Because the moment she senses you need her approval to feel whole, she begins to test that dependency, not to destroy you, but to confirm the truth her biology already suspects. If she can shake you, you cannot lead her. And no woman, no matter how modern, liberated, or independent, can fully admire a man she can emotionally lead. It violates something ancient in her nervous system. Machiavelli would call that natural order. We'd call it polarity, the dynamic that keeps passion alive. So the wise man doesn't fight her tests, he welcomes them.
He reads them as data, not disrespect. He understands that in every moment of tension, she's really asking one question. Can I trust your stability more than my emotions? And if your presence answers yes, not through words, but through composure, she submits not out of weakness, but relief. She stops trying to control you because she finally feels safe not needing to. That's the paradox Machiavelli would have admired most. The leader who gains loyalty through fear, not of punishment, but of losing his equilibrium. But that kind of man is rare. Most crumble under the smallest gust of emotional wind. They over-explain, over-text, over-prove. They drown in their own empathy until it turns to resentment. They forget that love, like power, only thrives when framed by principle. Without principle, affection becomes appetite, insatiable, unpredictable, eventually exhausting. Machiavelli would have called it political suicide. We call it heartbreak. To master emotion is not to suppress it. It's to understand its economy, when to spend, when to save, when to invest in silence. The strongest men aren't cold, they're deliberate. Their warmth feels expensive because it is. Their peace cannot be bought because it was earned. And when a woman encounters that kind of energy, she stops negotiating. She starts respecting. Because deep down, every woman knows the man who doesn't need control over her is the only one who can't be controlled by her. You can almost hear Machiavelli whisper through the centuries, "Appearances rule the world." He never meant that truth was unimportant, only that truth without perception is powerless. And that's where modern men lose the game. They think honesty alone earns respect. It doesn't. Respect comes from presentation, from the quiet art of shaping what your presence communicates. A man who doesn't understand this becomes easy to read, easy to predict, and therefore easy to control. Watch how women move through life. They rarely show their entire hand. They curate mystery like it's currency. They reveal just enough to keep your attention, but never enough to lose control of the narrative. That's Machiavellian mastery in motion, emotional politics at its finest. The world calls it intuition, but Machiavelli would call it statecraft, because influence, whether over a kingdom or a man, depends on the same law. Whoever controls perception controls behavior. A man who overshares, over-explains, over-confesses, he thinks he's being authentic, but what he's really doing is surrendering leverage. Every emotion you put on display becomes a potential tool for manipulation. Every confession gives someone a weapon they didn't have before. That's why Machiavelli warned rulers to guard their intentions until the outcome is secure. Never reveal all you think, he'd say, for men learn how to destroy you through what they know. Women already know this instinctively. They protect mystery the way a kingdom protects its treasury. But when a man learns the same restraint, not as a performance, but as a lifestyle, everything shifts. He stops reacting to every provocation. He stops explaining his silence. He lets his actions speak, lets uncertainty work in his favor. Because uncertainty breeds fascination, and fascination breeds respect. Machiavelli would have called it strategic ambiguity. We call it masculine presence. It's the moment when your stillness says more than your speeches ever could.
Most men don't realize how magnetic restraint is. They think passion means constant expression, when in truth, passion only feels alive in contrast to calm. Women are drawn to men who can remain composed in the face of chaos because it signals rare authority, emotional sovereignty. When she can't read your every thought, her imagination starts doing the work for her. And that's where attraction lives, in curiosity, in the space she can't fully understand. But this isn't about games. It's about restoring balance. A man who understands Machiavellian truth doesn't fake indifference, he cultivates it. He loves without losing self-respect, gives without begging for return, listens without absorbing every emotion thrown at him. He knows that power doesn't come from dominance, it comes from self-command. And when he finally learns that, something extraordinary happens. The manipulation stops working, because manipulation needs reaction to survive. It feeds on emotional response. The moment you stop giving it, it starves. The silence that once felt uncomfortable becomes your ally. You no longer need to prove your worth to anyone. You embody it. You move like a man who's already chosen himself. And paradoxically, that's when women feel the strongest pull, because the same independence that once threatened them now commands their admiration. Machiavelli would have smiled at that, not because he loved games of control, but because he understood human nature too well. People chase what they can't easily possess. They respect what doesn't beg for understanding, and in the end, the man who learns to master appearance, not through deception, but through discipline, wins the same way every great ruler does, quietly, completely, and without apology. He wrote that fortune favors the bold, but what he meant was this: life belongs to those who act with clarity, not emotion. In the end, that's what every man must learn if he hopes to survive love without losing himself. You cannot outplay chaos if you're ruled by it. You cannot command loyalty if you haven't mastered solitude. Machiavelli's wisdom was never about cruelty, it was about control, starting with the control of one's own impulses. Because the man who cannot rule himself will always find a woman eager to rule him. The tragedy is that most men don't realize this until they've given everything away. They confuse surrender with devotion, and by the time they wake up, their peace belongs to someone else. The wise man doesn't hate women for this. He simply stops worshipping them. He sees them not as goddesses or demons, but as human beings, equally strategic, equally hungry for meaning, equally capable of deception and truth. And in that realization, he reclaims his balance. He stops negotiating for worth. He stops seeking permission to be himself. He becomes the kind of man Machiavelli admired, unshakable, feared not for his temper, but for his calm. You can tell when a man reaches that point. His presence changes. He listens differently. He no longer argues to win. He observes to understand. His silence becomes a weapon, his detachment a kind of grace. Women sense it instantly. They can't control him, but they can't stop thinking about him either, because he no longer needs anything from them. His validation is self-supplied. He's polite, but untouchable, warm, but never weak. He lives as Machiavelli's ideal prince would, appearing kind while remaining ungoverned, and that's when something shifts. Women stop playing games around him because games only work on players. They start offering honesty instead of theatrics, respect instead of tension. Love, for the first time, stops being a negotiation and becomes an exchange between equals. Machiavelli would have called that a miracle, but it isn't. It's mastery, It's the quiet reward for every man who learns to think before he feels, to hold his ground before he speaks, to love without losing his edge. Because in the end, the female mind isn't an enemy to decode, it's a mirror. It reflects what kind of man you are. If you're desperate, it exposes it. If you're disciplined, it amplifies it. Every test, every silence, every contradiction, each one reveals whether you're fit to lead yourself. That's why the lesson was never about women at all. It was about you. So the next time you find yourself chasing, pleading, explaining, remember Machiavelli's cruel mercy. People only respect what they fear to lose. If she feels your absence more than your presence, you've already won. If your silence echoes louder than your words, you've become something rare, a man of consequence in an age of noise. And that's the true prize, not dominance, not control. Peace, the kind that can't be taken because it's no longer for sale. The kind that comes when you finally understand what Machiavelli tried to teach every ruler, every lover, every fool who mistook emotion for wisdom. You either command your nature or someone else will. So be kind, be wise, but above all, be sovereign. If you felt this message, if it awakened something in you, then don't just listen, share it. Like, subscribe, and support the channel through the link in the description. Because the world needs more men who think, not just feel. Men who love but never kneel.